The air in the Blue Lotus lounge was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and unspoken threats. Isabella felt the sweat bead at the nape of her neck as Director Sangmin stepped closer, his voice a greasy whisper against her ear. "The reports, Isabella. Sign them, or I'll make sure you never work in architecture again. Not in this city. Not anywhere." Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She scanned the room, looking for an exit, but Sangmin's bodyguards blocked the path. That's when she saw him. Sitting in a velvet booth in the darkest corner was a man who looked like he breathed fire for a living. His white shirt was crisp, unbuttoned at the collar to reveal a creeping vine of black ink, tattoos that climbed up his neck and disappeared under his jaw. He wasn't looking at the dancers or the drinks. He was looking straight at her. Driven by a sudden, reckless impulse, Isabella didn't run for the door. She marched straight toward the man with the tattoos. "I need you to do something for me," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce as she reached his table. The stranger tilted his head, his dark eyes obsidian hard. "And why would I do anything for you, stranger?" "Because if you don't," she glanced back at the approaching director, "I'm dead. Kiss me, pretend to be my boyfriend just for 5 minutes." A slow, dangerous smirk spread across the man's face. He didn't say yes. Instead, he reached out, gripped her waist with a hand that felt like iron, and pulled her onto his lap. "Careful what you wish for, Isabella," he murmured, his voice a low vibration she felt in her bones. "Because once I claim something in public, I never let it go." Isabella had come to Seoul to build a legacy, not to become a pawn in a game of shadows. As one of the youngest architectural restoration experts in the field, her mind was her greatest asset, logical, structural, and precise. But logic couldn't help her against the corruption of the city's elite. The man holding her now was Kim Jae-poo. To the public, he was a reclusive venture capitalist. To the streets, he was the ghost of the Yulhan, the head of a syndicate that moved like a scalpel through the city's infrastructure. He was the one man even the corrupt director Sangmin feared. As Jae-poo leaned in, his lips brushing hers in a display of possessive theater, the entire room went silent. The clink of glasses stopped. The music seemed to fade. Isabella thought she was using a stranger to escape a bully. She had no idea she had just handed her life over to a king. She wanted a temporary shield. He saw a permanent partner. This is the story of a woman who walked into the lion's den to escape a wolf, only to realize the lion had been waiting for her all along. In a world where every smile is a mask and every kiss is a contract, Isabella and Jae-poo are about to rewrite the rules of the city, or burn it all down trying. Hello, family. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments so I can specially send you a regard. Now let's go into the depth of the story. The kiss was less a romantic gesture and more a public declaration of ownership. Jae-poo's lips, cool and firm, devoured hers with a calculated intensity that left Isabella breathless, not from passion, but from a mix of shock and a perverse sense of relief. She felt the eyes of the entire Blue Lotus lounge on them, particularly the venomous glare of director Sangmin, who stood frozen a few feet away, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Jae-poo's hand on her waist tightened, a silent command for her to play along. She could feel the hard lines of his tattooed arm pressed against her back, a stark contrast to the soft silk of her dress. This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was a performance, precise and chilling. When he finally broke the kiss, it was with a deliberate slowness, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held hers captive. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Joggy?" he purred, the Korean term of endearment sounding like a threat in his low voice. Isabella managed a shaky smile, her mind racing. Joggy, she knew enough Korean to understand the implications of that word. He wasn't just playing the part of a casual boyfriend. He was playing the part of a serious, possessive one. Sangmin, finally finding his voice, sputtered, "Jae-poo, what is the meaning of this? This woman?" Jae-poo's gaze flickered to Sangmin, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "This woman, director, is mine," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion, yet carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "And I do not appreciate you harassing her." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent warning. Perhaps you should consider a change of venue before I decide to make some permanent adjustments to your evening plans. The unspoken threat hung heavy, understood by everyone in the room, especially Sang-min. The director, pale and sweating, stammered a hasty apology and backed away, his bodyguards quickly ushering him out of the lounge. Isabella watched him go, a wave of triumphant relief washing over her, quickly followed by a chilling realization. She had just exchanged one dangerous situation for another, far more enigmatic one. As soon as Sang-min was out of sight, Jai-Poo's grip on her loosened, and he smoothly helped her off his lap. The public facade dropped instantly. His expression was once again impassive, his eyes devoid of the feigned affection. "Now," he said, his voice back to its cool, measured tone, "I believe we need to have a conversation, Isabella." He gestured to a more secluded, curtained-off booth in the corner of the lounge. Isabella followed, her mind a whirlwind of questions. Who are you?" she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper as they settled into the plush seating. Jai-Poo leaned back, observing her with an unnerving intensity. "My name is Kim Jai-Poo," he stated. "As you already know, apparently." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over her, lingering on her dress, her hair, her eyes. "And you, Isabella, are a surprisingly audacious woman. Most people wouldn't dare approach me, let alone demand a kiss." "I was desperate," she explained, a defensive edge to her voice. "Sang-min was going to ruin me. My father's legacy, everything I've worked for, I just needed him to back off." She still couldn't quite process the ease with which Jai-Poo had dispatched a man who held so much power in the city. "Desperation is a powerful motivator," Jai-Poo acknowledged, a faint, almost imperceptible curve on his lips. "But it also comes with a price." Isabella's breath hitched. "A price?" "You see, Isabella, by making such a public display, you have implicated me. You have, in effect, declared to a room full of very observant people that you are mine." His eyes bore into hers. "And while it certainly solved your immediate problem, it has created a rather significant one for me." "I don't understand," she whispered. He sighed, a sound of subtle impatience. "Let me be explicit. I am not merely a venture capitalist, as the society pages might suggest. I am the head of the Yulhan. We manage certain assets. And in our world, public association with someone, particularly someone of your striking presence, implies a level of personal interest. It implies a weakness, a vulnerability." Isabella felt a cold dread creep up her spine. Mafia. The word echoed in her head, far more sinister than any syndicate or assets. She had literally run into the arms of the devil to escape a demon. What does that mean for me?" Jai-Poo steepled his fingers, his gaze unwavering. "It means we are now bound in a way. You need my protection, and I now have an unexpected loose end to tie up, unless you wish for the entire Yulhan to consider you a direct threat to my operations." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Don't look so alarmed, Isabella. This could be mutually beneficial." "Beneficial how?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "I need eyes and ears in the clean world, the one of blueprints and permits of legitimate contractors and developers," he explained, a glint of something unreadable in his eyes. "There is a serpent in the garden, a leak within my organization, and they are using seemingly legitimate channels to funnel information. Your architectural expertise, your ability to read between the lines of a building's structure, could be invaluable." He leaned back again. "You need my public protection to keep Sang-min and others like him at bay. In return, you will help me find my mole. Think of it as a consultation, a very high-stakes one." Isabella stared at him, trying to process this surreal turn of events. She was being blackmailed by a mafia boss, but this time, the currency wasn't money or documents. It was her intellect and her unexpected connection to him. The price of her impulsive kiss was now a dangerous alliance. She had nowhere else to go. Sang-min would ensure that. And in Jai-Poo's dangerous world, perhaps, lay her only chance for true safety. "What if I refuse?" she challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. Jai-Poo merely smiled, a predatory flash of white in the dim light. "Then you truly will be dead, Isabella, and not just professionally." He then took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving hers. "So do we have a deal?" The next morning, Isabella woke to a sense of unreality. The opulent hotel suite, a courtesy arranged by Jaipu's unseen staff, felt both luxurious and like a gilded cage. Her red dress from the night before lay draped over a chair, a silent testament to her reckless act. Had she truly agreed to work for a criminal organization? Her rational mind screamed at the absurdity, but the memory of Sangmin's predatory gaze and the even more chilling threat in Jaipu's eyes kept her grounded in the new, dangerous reality. A discreet knock on the door announced a delivery. A neatly pressed, conservative pantsuit hung in a garment bag, accompanied by a small, elegant phone. A note, written in precise Korean, simply read, "Your first assignment awaits. Car at 9 a.m." It was unsigned, but the implication was clear. Jaipu wasted no time. At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up. The driver, a stern-faced man in a dark suit with a subtle earpiece, simply nodded to her as she approached. The ride through Seoul was a blur. The city, usually a vibrant tapestry of modernity and tradition, now seemed to hide secrets behind every glittering facade. She felt a profound sense of isolation, cut off from her old life, plunged into the unknown. They arrived at an unassuming, yet undeniably expensive, high-rise building in a bustling commercial district. It wasn't one of the grand architectural marvels she usually studied, but a more utilitarian, albeit impeccably designed, office block. Inside, the atmosphere was hushed, almost sterile. No casual chatter, no bustling crowds, just quiet efficiency. The driver escorted her to a private elevator that ascended directly to the penthouse. Jaipu was already there, standing before a wall of monitors displaying complex, three-dimensional architectural renderings. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to amplify his already formidable presence. He didn't turn immediately, allowing her a moment to observe him. He was a man carved from granite, precise and unyielding. The tattoos, now largely hidden by his clothes, seemed to hum beneath his skin. "You're punctual," he observed, without turning, his voice low and resonant. "A good trait. Sit." He gestured to a minimalist leather chair facing his desk, where an open laptop and a stack of blueprints lay waiting. Isabella sat, her posture stiff. "What exactly am I looking for?" He finally turned, his dark eyes assessing her with an unnerving scrutiny. "My organization is involved in logistics, shipping, construction. We need to be efficient, transparent where necessary. Someone inside is attempting to disrupt that. They are feeding information, diverting resources, and manipulating contracts." He gestured to the monitors. "This building is a new acquisition, a central hub for several key operations. On paper, it's flawless. In practice, it's a concrete labyrinth. I need you to find the hidden paths." He pulled up a digital rendering of the building's internal structure, a complex network of pipes, wiring, and support beams. "My internal security team has swept for physical bugs, digital breaches. Nothing. But the anomalies persist. Deliveries rerouted. Information vanishing. It's as if the building itself is working against us." Isabella studied the intricate diagram. Her expertise wasn't just in restoration. It was in understanding the intent behind a building's design, its hidden logic, its structural whispers. She saw not just steel and glass, but the architect's vision, the builder's shortcuts, the subtle deviations that could hide a multitude of secrets. "You believe the flaw is in the design itself?" she asked, a spark of professional curiosity momentarily eclipsing her fear. "Or in its execution," Jaipu replied, leaning against his desk. "Someone could have influenced the original blueprints, knowing it would create vulnerabilities, or, more subtly, created a seemingly legitimate structural oversight that could be exploited. I need you to think like a mole who understands architecture better than my security analysts. Where would you hide an access point? A surveillance point? A route for illicit movement that appears, on paper, to be a ventilation shaft or an emergency conduit." He then displayed a series of financial records, permit applications, and construction schedules alongside the architectural plans. "Connect the dots, Isabella. Look for the unusual variances, the accelerated permits, the contractors with no previous track record, the sudden change in materials for a non-load-bearing wall." Isabella spent the next several hours engrossed in the data. The fear slowly receded, replaced by the familiar thrill of a complex problem. This was her element. She saw patterns others missed, felt the subtle deviations in the flow. The building began to speak to her. There was a particular ventilation shaft, unusually wide for its intended purpose, that ran directly from the penthouse down to a rarely used service entrance in the basement. On the blueprints, it seemed innocuous. But Isabella saw its potential. "This," she said, tapping the screen, "this shaft. It's oversized, and the material change halfway down a cheaper alloy. It would allow for quiet, easy access, and it connects to an old, decommissioned sewer line that exits a block away." Her eyes gleamed with the triumph of discovery. It's not just a ventilation shaft, it's a secret pathway, and the change in material could allow for a listening device or even a small camera to be easily installed and concealed. Jaipu simply watched her, a flicker of something akin to approval in his dark eyes. "Impressive," he murmured. "Now, Isabella, tell me who signed off on that particular design amendment, and more importantly, who benefited from it." The concrete labyrinth was indeed speaking, and Isabella, the architect, was its translator. Her journey into Jaipu's world had just begun, and the blueprints of deception were slowly unfolding before her. The discovery of the hidden shaft confirmed Jaipu's suspicions and cemented Isabella's value to him. The days that followed blurred into a routine that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She would spend her mornings sifting through building plans, financial ledgers, and construction contracts, dissecting the structural integrity of Jaipu's various holdings. Her afternoons were often spent with Jaipu himself, debriefing in his penthouse office, the panoramic views of Seoul a stark reminder of the immense power he wielded. He was a demanding, meticulous boss, but he listened, truly listened, to her analyses, his sharp mind absorbing every detail. Their evenings, however, took on a different, more unsettling dimension. Jaipu insisted on maintaining their public charade. "It's crucial, Isabella," he had explained, his voice brooking no argument. "Sangmin is a cornered rat. He will be looking for any weakness. Our relationship must appear impregnable." This meant dinners at exclusive restaurants, attendance at high-society galas, and quiet drinks at upscale lounges. Isabella, once a creature of libraries and construction sites, was now forced into a constant performance. She had to master the subtle art of clinging to Jaipu's arm, of meeting his gaze with an answering smile, of allowing his hand to rest possessively on her lower back. Each touch, each glance was a calculated move, a silent message to the watchful eyes around them. She is with him. She is protected. One particular evening found them at a meticulously curated art exhibition, a stark white gallery filled with avant-garde sculptures. Isabella, dressed in a sleek, sapphire blue gown, felt a familiar tension coiled in her stomach. Every elegant socialite seemed to whisper about the mysterious Kim Jaipu and his striking new partner. Jaipu stood beside her, his presence a dark, powerful anchor in the glittering room. He rarely spoke to others, preferring to observe, his eyes missing nothing. Isabella, despite herself, found a strange comfort in his silent vigilance. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also undeniably effective. No one dared approach her with any untoward intentions. As she admired a particularly intricate piece of metalwork, Jaipu leaned in, his voice a low rumble next to her ear. "You've identified another suspicious pattern in the Diamond Point project's material procurements," he stated, changing the subject from art to business with his usual abruptness. "Specifically, a bulk order for a rare, conductive metal that has no place in the building's intended purpose." Isabella felt a jolt of pride that he remembered her findings. "It's used in advanced shielding technology or for certain types of high-frequency signal transmission," she explained softly, her professional passion briefly overriding the social anxiety. "It's completely out of place for a residential tower, unless someone is building something within the building that requires it, something hidden." "Precisely," Jaipu murmured, a hint of something that might have been approval in his tone. He then led her toward a quieter alcove, away from the throngs of curious onlookers. "The mole is meticulous. They are layering legitimate activity with illicit. They believe themselves untouchable." Their conversation, always skirting the edge of danger, had become a strange form of intimacy. They spoke in veiled terms, their glances conveying more than their words. Isabella found herself drawn to the sharp edges of his mind, the ruthless efficiency with which he analyzed problems. She was beginning to see past the fearsome reputation to the calculating strategist beneath. As the evening wore on, a slow, melancholic jazz piece began to play. Jaipu, without a word, extended a hand to her. It was not a request, but an expectation. Isabella, surprised, placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle as he led her to a small, impromptu dance floor that had cleared slightly. They moved together, a stark contrast to the lively chatter around them. His arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her close, while her hand rested lightly on his shoulder. It was a slow dance, almost a sway, and for the first time, Isabella felt a flicker of something beyond performance. The proximity was disarming. She could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath her fingertips, smell the subtle, woody scent of his cologne. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. He was watching her, his dark gaze unblinking. There was no pretense in this moment, no audience to impress. It was just them, moving to the rhythm of a silent understanding. And in that moment, Isabella realized the depth of her danger and the strange, undeniable pull she felt towards this enigmatic man. He was a labyrinth, and she was already lost within his walls, finding solace in the very shadows she had once feared. "The mole's name," Jaipu suddenly whispered, his voice cutting through the soft music, "is Director Park. He's been working with Sangmin for years. We just found the connection." He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her hair. "And now, Isabella, we begin the real game." The discovery of Director Park's betrayal changed the atmosphere in the penthouse from cold efficiency to a low-boil war footing. Isabella spent 48 hours straight pored over the digital blueprints of Diamond Point, the luxury residential tower that was supposed to be the crown jewel of Jaipu's legitimate holdings. "It's not just about what's there, Jaipu," Isabella said, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. She pointed at a cross-section of the 22nd floor. "It's about the dead space. Look at the structural load for the central pillar. It's rated for twice the weight it's actually carrying on this floor." Jaipu stood behind her, his presence a warm, steady weight. He placed a hand on the back of her chair, his tattooed fingers dangerously close to her neck. "And what does that tell you, architect?" "It tells me there's a subfloor," she whispered. "A 3-foot gap between the ceiling of the 21st and the floor of the 22nd that doesn't exist on the city's filing. That conductive metal you found, it's lining this entire void. It's a Faraday cage. Someone is running a massive, untraceable server farm or a signal intercept hub right under your nose." Jaipu's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a financial leak, it was a strategic invasion. Director Park wasn't just stealing money, he was using Jaipu's own infrastructure to build a shadow empire for Sangmin. "If we raid it now, they'll wipe the drives remotely," Jaipu mused, his eyes narrowing. "I need someone inside who can physically disable the override before my team breaches. Someone who knows the layout." Isabella felt a chill. "You're talking about me." "You are the only one who can navigate the service ducts without a map, Isabella. You found it. You know its structural weaknesses." He turned her chair to face him. For the first time, he didn't look at her like a tool, but like a partner. "I won't lie to you, it's dangerous. But if we do this, Sangmin loses his leverage. You'll be free, truly free." Isabella looked at the man who had claimed her in a crowded lounge. She realized that she didn't want to just be free from him, she wanted to be successful with him. "I'll do it, but I need a floor plan of the security sensor grid." Jaipu leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You'll have everything I have, Isabella, including my life if it comes to that." The Diamond Point Tower was a ghost at 3:00 a.m. Isabella, dressed in tactical black, felt the weight of the comlink in her ear. She was deep inside the ventilation shaft she had identified, the one with the cheap alloy that didn't block signals. "I'm at the junction," she whispered into the mic. "Copy," Jaipu's voice crackled, steady and calm. "My team is in the basement. We're waiting for your signal to cut the internal power. You have 3 minutes before the backup generators kick in." Isabella crawled through the narrow metal tunnel, her architectural mind mapping the turns. She reached the subfloor void. Using a specialized laser cutter Jaipu's team had provided, she sliced through the drywall. She dropped into the dead space. It was a forest of wires and humming servers. At the far end, she saw a man, Director Park, frantically typing at a terminal. He wasn't alone. 2 of Sangmin's hired guns stood guard. "Jaipu, Park is here. He's starting a data purge, Isabella hissed. Wait for my signal, Isabella. Do not move. But she saw the progress bar on the screen. 80% complete. If that data vanished, Jaipu would never be able to prove the connection between the legitimate corporate world and the underworld coup. She couldn't wait. She spotted a fire suppression canister near the server rack. She didn't have a gun, but she had physics. She threw her heavy tablet at the valve, the impact shattering the seal. Carbon dioxide hissed out in a blinding cloud. Hey, one of the guards shouted, firing blindly into the mist. Isabella dove behind a server rack, her heart hammering. Jaipu, now, go now. The building shook as a controlled explosion took out the main power couplings. The lights died. In the sudden darkness, Isabella heard the heavy thud of boots and the unmistakable sound of suppressed gunfire. A hand suddenly grabbed her arm in the dark. She gasped, ready to fight, until she felt the familiar texture of a luxury watch and the heat of a tattooed palm. I told you to wait, Jaipu growled, pulling her against his chest as bullets whizzed overhead. He shielded her with his body, his weapon raised, returning fire with terrifying precision. In the chaos, Isabella saw Park trying to escape through a side hatch. She tripped him with a loose cable, sending the traitor sprawling. Jaipu didn't hesitate. He pinned Park to the ground with a boot to the throat. The game is over, Park, Jaipu said, his voice like grinding stones. The victory at Diamond Point was short-lived. While they had secured the data, Sangmin had moved on a different front. When they returned to the safe house, Isabella's phone was buzzing with a frantic message from her sister back in the States. Nia, the firm, Dad's old office. There was an explosion. Everyone is okay, but the files, everything is gone. A man called. He said to tell you the architect needs to come home. Isabella collapsed into a chair, the adrenaline of the heist replaced by a cold, numbing horror. He went after my family. He went after my father's work. Jaipu stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the rising sun of Seoul. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He walked over and knelt in front of her, forcing her to look at him. He thinks this makes you weak, Jaipu said, his voice surprisingly soft. He thinks that by attacking your past, he can control your future. He doesn't know you like I do. Isabella looked at him, tears stinging her eyes. He destroyed the only thing I had left of my father. No, Jaipu countered, taking her hands in his. Your father's legacy is in your mind. It's in the way you see the world. Sangmin just made this personal for me, Isabella. Before, this was about my organization. Now it's about us. He stood up, pulling her with him. We aren't hiding anymore. He wants a confrontation. We'll give him one at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Seoul Trade Center tomorrow. He thinks he's the guest of honor. He's actually the sacrifice. Isabella wiped her eyes, a new, harder light appearing in them. I'm not going back to the States, not until he's finished. Jaipu touched her cheek, his thumb lingering on her skin. For the first time, the pretend boyfriend looked at her with genuine, raw admiration. Then let's show him what happens when an architect and a ghost build a trap together. The cliffhanger hung in the air. The final battle wouldn't be in the shadows, but in the most public place in the city, where the world would see who truly ruled Seoul. Here are the final 3 chapters, bringing the story to its intense and successful conclusion. The day of the Seoul Trade Center groundbreaking arrived with a deceptive calm. This wasn't just a building. It was the largest infrastructure project in the country, and director Sangmin was set to give the keynote speech. He believed he had won, that by destroying Isabella's father's archives, he had broken her spirit and forced Jaipu into a defensive crouch. He couldn't have been more wrong. Inside the VIP holding room, Isabella stood before a mirror, smoothing out the lines of a sharp, ivory-colored suit. She looked like the image of professional success, but beneath the fabric, she was wired. A small, high-frequency transmitter was tucked into her blazer, connected to the internal systems of the trade center's skeleton. Jaipu entered, looking lethal in a charcoal suit that hid the weapons he carried. He walked up behind her, his reflection meeting hers in the glass. He didn't say a word, he simply placed his hands on her shoulders. The weight was grounding. The data we recovered from the subfloor proves Sang-min funneled millions in ghost materials to build this center, Isabella whispered. The structural integrity is fine, but the financial trail is a murder scene. If I trigger the digital overlay during his speech, every screen in the plaza will show the diverted funds in real time. He'll try to kill the feed, Jaipu said. My men are already in the control room to ensure he can't. But Isabella, once you hit that button, there's no going back to your quiet life. You'll be the woman who took down a titan. Isabella turned around, her chest brushing his. I don't want a quiet life anymore, Jaipu. I want a life that matters with you. For the first time since they met, Jaipu's mask cracked. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Then let's show them the power of a partnership they never saw coming. The plaza was packed with press, politicians, and the city's elite. Director Sang-min stood at the mahogany podium, a smug smile on his face as he began his speech about integrity and the future of Seoul. Isabella sat in the front row, Jaipu beside her, his hand firmly holding hers under the table. She felt Sang-min's eyes lock onto hers, a flicker of triumphant cruelty in his gaze. He thought he was looking at a victim. Now, Jaipu breathed. Isabella tapped a sequence on her watch. Suddenly, the massive 50-foot LED screens behind Sang-min flickered. The promotional video of the building vanished, replaced by a cascading waterfall of red text, bank account numbers, wire transfer receipts, and the specific blueprints Isabella had decrypted showing the illegal Faraday cage, server farms. The crowd gasped. The reporters began shouting. Sang-min froze, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. Turn it off! Security, shut it down! He screamed. But the security guards in the wings didn't move. They were Jaipu's men now. Sang-min looked down at Isabella, his composure shattering. He reached into his jacket, not for a phone, but for a compact pistol. He was going to take her down with him. Before he could even clear the holster, Jaipu was a blur of motion. He didn't draw a gun. He launched a heavy glass award from the table with the precision of a professional athlete. It struck Sang-min's wrist with a sickening crack. The crowd erupted into chaos. Jaipu stood up, shielding Isabella with his body as his tactical team swarmed the stage. He didn't look at the cameras or the screaming crowd. He looked only at Isabella. It's done, he said over the roar of the sirens. The wolf is caught. 6 months later. The skyline of Seoul was changing. The trade center was being finished, but this time, under the supervision of Isabella and Associates, a new firm dedicated to ethical restoration and transparent architecture. Isabella stood on the balcony of her new office, looking out at the city she had once feared. She was no longer the woman pleading for a fake kiss in a dark lounge. She was the most respected architect in the city, the woman who had cleaned up the industry. A pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. She leaned back into the familiar warmth. Jaipu's tattoos were visible as he had rolled up his sleeves, his chin resting on her shoulder. The board approved the new plans for the harbor district, he murmured into her ear. It seems they prefer your vision over the old way of doing things. And the Yulhan? Isabella asked, turning in his arms. Jaipu smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. We're transitioning. Legitimacy suits me, Isabella, especially when I have a reason to stay in the light. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Inside was a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a custom-cut emerald set in a band designed like a delicate, interlocking structural beam. It was a piece of architecture for her finger. No more pretending, Isabella, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I claimed you in that lounge to save you. Now I'm asking you to stay because I can't imagine this city without you. Will you build a life with me? Isabella didn't hesitate. She didn't need to calculate the risks or check the blueprints. She leaned in and kissed him, not a desperate plea, but a promise of a future. Yes, she whispered against his lips, as long as we build it together. The story ends not with a rescue, but with a coronation. Isabella and Jaipu, the architect and the king, stood together as the sun set over a city they had changed forever. Their success wasn't just in the buildings they made, but in the trust they had built in the ruins of their past. The end. Kindly subscribe if you love what you've just watched.